Hello YouTube fam, what's up? It's Allie. So the first mini set of 2021 is upon us, a continuation of madness at the Darkmoon fair that's coming out on January 21st. I'm going to do a card review. I'm not going to spend too much time on cards that aren't as impactful as others because I'm trying to get this out in a timely manner. But before we get started, I just want to say hallelujah, 2,000 gold or $14.99 for all 35 cards in the set. Is Blizzard listening to us? Maybe they're listening to us. Who knows? But I think that's probably like the thing that I'm happiest to hear because obviously there's been a lot of controversy about how expensive the game is with the battle pass and all the drama. So thumbs up, Blizzard, from us. Thank you for allowing us to buy this with 2,000 gold. All right, without further ado, let's get started on the cards, and yeah, away we go. So I'm going to start us out with Warlock cards because the new Warlock Legendary I think is one of my favorite cards from the mini set, and that is called Envoy Rustwix. It's a 5-mana 5/4 demon with Death Rattle. Shuffle 3 random prime legendary minions into your deck. And that is the confirmed primes themselves, not the card that shuffles the primes, the actual prime. And I love this card, and I think the reason why I like it so much is because slower Warlock archetypes have always been one of my favorite types of decks to play. So even lock, cube lock, hand lock, or just control Warlock, Reno lock, like those have been some of my all-time favorite decks, and this is a perfect inclusion for that kind of Warlock deck. And recently, I've been playing a lot of Galakron Ticketus Warlock, which is definitely one of my faves, and I included Jiraxis because I wanted one extra win condition, because occasionally, I mean, even if after burning your opponent for 10 cards and becoming Galakron, like sometimes you become Galakron early to upgrade the Ticketus, you're not getting full value out of all 4 demons, that kind of thing. You sort of want maybe one extra win condition, so I put Jiraxis in the deck, which was kind of a meme, but a little bit of a liability, you know what I'm saying? Poor Jiraxis. But this card, the Envoy, is, I think, perfect for that spot as one extra thing to throw into the Ticketus decks for extra value against other greedy decks. I am unsure if Zoolock would play this. I could almost see it because it's not that expensive, and for 5 attack, 5 mana, like it's still reasonably aggressive, like in terms of like an aggressive attack stat. So it's not the worst, and I think it would come down to the meta. You know, if the meta was insanely fast, I don't think zoos would include this, but maybe if it was a, I don't know, like a slower greedy meta and zoos were kind of trying to hang with some extra value, I could see them running this. Like, I think my inclination at first is that they probably won't, but I don't think it's out of the question that we could maybe see those more mid-rangey zoo decks include this as well. Maybe we'll finally have an answer to what's the best prime, because that's always a little bit of a debate, at least in my community. I think it's Mage. It might just obviously be Mage, but I'm curious what YouTube thinks. What is the best prime to get out of Envoy Rustwix here? Or I guess give me the top 3. Why not? Next up, we've got the Lucky Soul Hoarder. It's a 3-mana 3/4 dual class card between Warlock and Demon Hunter. That is a battle cry. Shuffle two soul fragments into your deck, and if you corrupt it, you draw a card. So it's a spider tank statted soul fragment shuffler, like, essentially. And I certainly don't think it's a bad card. I mean, it's good stats for the mana cost, and you know, we know that there are soul fragment decks that exist, but I don't know if it will really see a ton of play, just because I'm not sure it's as useful as maybe some of the other soul fragment shufflers, and I don't think you want to have too many soul fragment shufflers. You still want other cards in the soul fragment decks that do things. So how much will we see this card? I'm not really sure, even though I think it's a fine card. Like, Demon Hunter, in terms of the corrupt cost, like, Demon Hunter already has access to a ton of draw, so I don't really think the draw portion of this card is that impactful. And with Warlock, you've got tap power, so you already have access to a ton of draw. So the drawing a card is a nice upside, sure. But, Soul Shear, having the 2 mana, 3 damage removal, you're not going to cut the Spirit Jailer. Obviously, you wouldn't really be cutting that many things, I don't think. It's a nice option, I suppose, if you really wanted more Soul Fragments. But we might already have enough. I guess it depends. If you wanted to run a more, minion-based Soul Fragment Warlock deck, maybe you would run this instead of the School Spirits because you're looking for more bodies than AoE. It's a nice option. We'll just leave it at that. Next up, we've got a 3 mana Warlock spell that is called Backfire that draws you 3 cards and deals 3 damage to your hero. So I think it's quite obvious to say that I think this card is quite good, and particularly in Zoolock, right? There's already synergistic cards with damaging yourself like Dark Lair, which apparently is pretty oppressive in Wild. I don't really play Wild much myself, but Wild players, you can let me know. So this seems kind of busted for that style of pain Zoolock. So it's obviously a very good card, but I think the interesting conversation about it is it worth it in a slower style of Warlock deck? Because I don't really know if I'd run this in Control Lock, despite it being a really good card. I mean, obviously the caveat is that, Warlock has tap hero power, so I'm just not entirely sure if you would necessarily run this in the Ticketus style. Probably Ticketus is going to be the popular control style of Warlock for a while, I'm assuming here. So I'm not sure if we would really run it in that kind of deck. I would almost venture to say no, but I could be wrong. I'm actually quite curious to get the collective opinion, so please let me know what you think in the comments. But the card in and of itself, I obviously think is really good. And we'll see if it shows up in more places beyond just Zoolock. Next up is a 3 mana dual class spell between Priest and Warlock called Hysteria that reads, choose a minion, it attacks random minions until it dies. So I actually think that this might be a contender for one of my favorite cards as well, just because the flavor is so awesome. Obviously an ode to mass hysteria. It's like a little mini hysteria. And yeah, I think it's a pretty damn good card, honestly. I think the power of it comes in its flexibility. It's choose a minion. It could be your opponent's minions in addition to your own, of course, and has the potential to, really wipe out a board or answer a threat. Have your opponent's minions trade away each other. For 3 mana, I'd say this is really good, honestly. I'm sure there's some cute stuff that you can do with it, you could do it on a lifesteal minion, yours or your opponent's, and gain a whole bunch of life. I'm really excited. I feel like Priest and Warlock both already do have access to control cards, but this one is quite unique, I think. And I mentioned this earlier, but I'm just really looking forward to a control style of Warlock being one of the most competitive decks. Hopefully that I would really like that. And I think that Hysteria would absolutely be included in that and could potentially boost the archetype to maybe having another type of defile effect. That would be really neat. And I could also see this being really good in Priest as well, especially because, as I said earlier, the lifesteal, you've got apotheosis type of things. So yeah, I think it's wonderful. I'm really excited to play with it. Moving on to some Demon Hunter cards, and we'll start out with the 1 mana spell called Illidari Studies. Discover an outcast card, and your next one costs 1 less. This card is good. This card is good. When you play this card and you discover an outcast card, it is automatically outcasted because that's how cards work in Hearthstone after you discover them. It's the farmost card. So basically, Illidari Studies discover a Skull of Gul'dan. Skull of Gul'dan is still absolutely insane. I still think one of the most problematic cards for Demon Hunter. And this just helps you get there faster. And I'm sure like anything that's 1 mana discover, like it's super flexible. And again, the mana reduction does carry over to future turns, similar to Nature Studies and Druid, right? And obviously Nature Studies is a really good card. It's very, very similar. But like I said, the coolest thing is that you automatically have the Outcast enabled. So yeah, I mean, look, Demon Hunter gets another good card. Shocker. I don't know what else to say about it other than it's really good. I'm sure you're going to see this in many different Demon Hunter decks that, you know, particularly want to find another skull as soon as possible, or probably just most Demon Hunter decks in general. Next up is a dual class card between Demon Hunter and Hunter. It's a 2 mana 2/3 called Fel Fire Deadeye that makes your hero power cost 1 less. Yeah, I think this card's okay. Like, I don't think it's necessarily bad. It's obviously got decent stats for a 2-drop. 2 mana 2/3 is always solid, right? And the effect is obviously positive. But I just think that these kinds of cards, unless they're doing something really crazy, like it's just going to get answered on the board and not really do that much to warrant like taking a whole spot in the deck for this particular card. The first thing that comes to mind is the Inspire type effects in Hunter. So there's the Phase Stalker that pulls a secret out of your deck after you use your hero power, or the Dragonbane legendary that deals 5 damage to something. So, you know, if this was already on the board, I guess that's some extra value, but I don't think it's anything too crazy. Honestly, if anything, I think that Tour Guide is probably just a better card. It's something that you can develop in the previous turn, and then your hero power is free. So if this, you know, was answered, Tour Guide just would seem better. And in Demon Hunter, it's the same type of deal. You know, it only costs 1 mana to use your hero power in Demon Hunter. So for this to really be all that valuable, this would have to have already been on the board from the previous turn. Unless I'm like missing some kind of crazy combo with your hero power being free. But again, you would just use Tour Guide in that situation and like set up for it. So I think it's a fine card. I'm like maybe it's something that will like randomly get popped out and it'll be convenient sometimes. But other than that, I don't really think it's really that crazy. And yeah, we'll just leave it at that. Next is Fel Saber, which is a 4 mana 5/6 demon. Can only attack if your hero attacked this turn. I don't think this card's really going to see play, even though it's obviously got great stats for 4 mana. I mean, obviously you need to attack, but we know that attacking for Demon Hunters really is not a difficult thing to do. Even at that, you know, being a good statted minion, like your cards generally that you're playing in your decks like are contributing to a win condition. So just like a vanilla, like doesn't really do much for a deck kind of thing. I just don't think it will really see play. So it'll probably see the most play when it like randomly pops out a demon out of another card or something like that. But I don't really want to talk about it for too long because I don't think it's very good. Moving on to Druid cards, we'll start out with the Dreaming Drake. It is a 3 mana 3/4 dragon with taunt. And then if you corrupt it, it gains +2/+2. So it'll be a 3 mana 5/6 taunt dragon. This is another one of those cards where I think it's a solid card. It's just, will it actually see play in a deck? Like, is it worth it in a deck? Maybe. It depends on what Druid will look like. Like, the first things that come to mind is that Overgrowth would easily corrupt this, right? So, you know, you play that on 4, and then you've got, you know, a 3 mana 5/6 taunt and some extra mana to do something else with. We do know that Yasharj is in Yasharj, whatever. There are definitely Yasharj decks in Druid, whether it's like a Highlander or if there's a Carnival Clown Druid deck. So, you know, hey, playing Yasharj and with a free 3 mana 5/6, if it's been corrupted, is solid. Like, it's not bad. It's good, I guess. But it's, again, I just because a card is good doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be like a meta deck with it in it. Would I put this in a a Highlander deck that had the whole Yasharj package going on, maybe. Would I put it in the Carnival Clown deck? Maybe. You know? I don't know what else to say other than I think it's fine. Like Spider Tank stats again, or Fierce Monkey, I guess, power creep, right? I think it's a nice little card. We'll see if it finds a home in a corruption deck or some kind of a dragon deck. But don't forget that we have rotation coming up soon, in April most likely, right? So there's Ysera Unleashed, like a lot of the dragons are going to be rotating. So we'll see what happens. But all in all, it's a solid little card. Next is Guidance. It is a 1 mana Druid and Shaman dual class card. Look at 2 spells, add 1 to your hand, or overload 1 to get both. I see this card more so in Druid that is working with the like either exotic mount seller package or Gadget Sand Auctioneer, where it's trying to play cheap spells for some kind of synergy, like the mount seller or the auctioneer. I don't see this in Shaman as much, and truthfully, like we don't really know what look at means. I'm assuming it just means look at 2 spells, like that obviously must be, but it's not super clear. So 2 random spells, the overload really isn't that bad. So I would imagine in most instances, unless you absolutely needed to play like the spell that you discover on curve next turn that happens to cost the exact without the overload, but I would imagine most times you'd be picking up both. But like again, I don't think that it's really all that great. It would synergize being a cheap spell in probably a Druid type of deck to get you more value. In Shaman, or like, okay, so another example, remember the Wicked Witch Doctor, like after you cast a spell, it summons a basic totem, that kind of stuff where, you're wanting cheap spells, and then this is a cheap spell with the upside of getting more value to your hand. But beyond those style of decks, like I don't really know if it's really that great, truthfully. Druid already has Nature Studies, and honestly, like a lot of the time, the 2 spells could just be bad. Next is another 1 mana spell called Resizing Pouch. That is a dual class card between Druid and Hunter. It reads, discover a card with cost equal to your remaining mana crystals. Truthfully, I can't really decide how much I like this card. I definitely see it more so in Druid than in Hunter. I think based on like the current archetypes that we see, you could put this definitely in a Highlander Hunter for sure. Actually, Highlander Hunter, I could see it in. But with Druid, I was talking about how there's auctioneer decks or there's exotic mount seller. Like that would definitely make sense in those type of decks that really benefit from having 1 mana spells. But just as a card in and of itself, like I can't decide if it's just a little too random. Like it's both your class cards in addition to neutral cards, of course, and both spells and minions too. Like I'm sure you can get really like for whatever reason, Overflow is really sticking in my mind. Like if I was a Druid and I really wanted an Overflow, I'd play this on 8 mana and try to look for it. But you could get like a random 7-drop, which maybe would be okay. Like I actually like it more as a late game card for like huge value as opposed to something cheap in the beginning. But so I kind of like it. I don't think it's bad, but I'm just on the fence of it being like too random to sort of justify it. It might help tutor for combo pieces, but again, it's still random. Like if you were looking for extra Moonfires or something for a Malygos deck, like you could always get Wisp or Desk Imp or Innervate. I think it might be too random, but it's certainly a fine value card. Like I'm sure it will be pretty good in Arena, right? Because you're trying to curve out in Arena. But I'm not completely sold on its place in a standard deck. Next up is Arbor Up. It's a 5 mana Druid spell that summons 2/2/2 treants and gives your minions +2/+1. I think if Token Druid is good, this will be included. Or if Treant Druid's good, I'm sure, yeah, this will be great. But I don't know. It's been a hot minute since Token Druid has been a meta deck. So my inclination is that it probably will stay that way. But if anything, this just puts one more Druid card into the pool of like Savage Roar effects that you could discover from nature studies, right? Like sometimes you're looking for lethal playing a Druid deck and there's Power of the Wild, Savage Roar, I guess Survival of the Fittest. Like there's some things, and this is just another one to kind of like add to that list. I wish that the Treants had Taunt. That would be cool. But look, it puts something on the board and it's a buff effect. That's all the stuff you want in a Token Druid. I just am doubtful that Token Druid will be good, but hey, I could be wrong. So I wouldn't mind seeing Token Druid happen again, honestly, but I don't know. With Lightning Bloom being in the mix, I could see Token Druid, like if it actually got some busted things in conjunction with Lightning Bloom, that could probably be bad. So we'll see how it goes. On to Hunter cards. First up, we've got a 3-mana 3/4 Saddle Master. After you play a beast, add a random beast to your hand. Not good enough. Not good enough. Like good stats and definitely a value card, but I don't know. Hunter's not really a class that's usually that concerned with like generating tons of value. It's typically a more aggressive class. Like even Highlander Hunter like plays aggressively, right? So I don't think this will see much play. It's like, it's not a bad card. It's got a cool, decent effect, but for the Hunter class, I don't think it's good enough. Next is a 2-mana Hunter spell, Bola Shot, that deals 1 damage to a minion and 2 damage to its neighbors. It's just not what Hunter needs or really wants. It can't go face. The face plays taunt, we still go face. Yeah, it's not going face, and generally you're not running control archetypes in Hunter. You're not going to want to put this in your deck over something else. Now, if there's ever a like control Hunter, I still don't think it's that great. So we're going to move on because I don't really think this is going to see much play. Moving on to my favorite class, Mage. And the first Mage card we'll see here is Key Warden Ivory. So it is a 5-mana 4/5 legendary. It's also a dual class card with Rogue. Battlecry, discover a dual class spell from any class, and Spellburst, get another copy. So I think this is a perfect card for a Highlander Mage and a Highlander Rogue, slower decks that are really trying to win on value, right? This is a perfect card for that kind of deck. If we're looking at the existing decks in the meta, like World Kick Rogue or Secret Rogue, that kind of stuff, the 5-mana slot is usually taken up by Jandice, and I don't think that this card is better than Jandice. And I'm not really sure how many like 5-mana cards you'd be wanting to run in that like faster style, miracle style of Rogue. So I definitely see this again in more of like a Highlander Galakron thing. But I have to be honest, like I'm bringing up so many of these archetypes and I'm realizing that, it's not that long until rotation. But for now, we'll talk about Highlander cards. So yeah, I definitely see it more in the Mage category. But truthfully, like once Highlander Mage rotates, like I don't know, if another slower control Mage deck comes along, I'm sure you will want this as well. There certainly are a pretty decent dual class cards, and you'll get the choice of 3 obviously with the Discover effect. So the likelihood that you get something pretty decent, I think, is relatively high with this card, and getting an extra copy is obviously good value. So overall, really love the Ivory, and I cannot wait to play it in Highlander Mage. You'll definitely see some Highlander Mage gameplay with this card on my YouTube channel for sure. Next up, we've got Conjure Mana Biscuit. It is a 2-mana Mage spell. Add a biscuit to your hand that refreshes 2 mana crystals. Presuming those biscuits are, I would think, 0 mana. It is a refresh effect. It is not a ramp effect. So it's kind of like a reverse Lightning Bloom or an unnerfed Innervate, which is definitely really interesting. It's important to note that, if you were to play this on 2, you can't ramp to 5, right? You could play 5 mana worth of cards on turn 3, but you can't like play a 5-drop or something like that. But yeah, I think this could be potentially problematic. We saw a couple metas ago that Cyclone Mage was a really popular deck, right? Cyclone or Mana Cyclone, Shenvala, Mana Giant, right? That style of mage that has like really explosive turns. Refreshing your mana could, for a couple mana crystals, could totally be utilized in that kind of a deck. And I do think this card has potential for some funky business when it comes to combos. Now, I'm going to let the hive mind figure out the crazy combos because I'm not coming up with it right now. But I'm sure that there's something like in Wild, maybe in Standard too, where, you know, being able to stock up on those mana biscuits, allowing for potentially some really crazy turns. You know, with Antonitis or a Malygos or whatever. There could be a ton of Sorcerer's Apprentice turns, you know. So Mozaki even. So I'm excited. I think this could be really neat because I love Mage. It's my favorite class. And I enjoy an OTK potentially every once in a while. So I'm really curious. This might be the card that I'm most interested to see what happens. What like I said, the hive mind of the community comes up with this card. Next is the Imprisoned Phoenix, which is a 2-mana, 2/3 elemental that is a dual class card with both Shaman and Mage. Okay, cool. That goes dormant for 2 turns and spell damage +2. I'm seeing these cards as I go, by the way, so I'm kind of reacting to it. And wow, I really like this card, and I love the artwork. Damn, it's really neat. Yeah, I think this is really neat. And actually in conjunction with the card that I just talked about, the Mana Biscuit, you could totally set up some really crazy turns with this. Even with Mozaki, right? Like OTK is obviously the first thing that comes to mind. The fact that it's dormant means that you can sort of like gear up and plan for everything. I mean, the spell damage +2 is really solid, and the fact that it's so cheap to sort of like, you know, you could set up in a later turn, do a whole bunch of else with the turn and just drop 2 mana, knowing that you have all like the combo pieces or something for your OTK or whatever it may be in the next couple turns. So I absolutely like this card a lot, and I think I'm going to try and make some kind of Mozaki Mage, maybe first day of the expansion in conjunction with this. That could be really neat. And I guess in discussing Shaman, I'm a Mage player. I think about the Mage capabilities first. You know, actually spell damage Shaman is kind of a thing right now. I think I've definitely run into it a decent amount. So there's potential for Shaman as well. I like it. The last Mage card here is Glacial Racer. It's a 1-mana, 1/3 with spell burst, deal 3 damage to all frozen enemies. So 1-mana, 1/3, like it's got good stats, and it's certainly got like a really cool potential with the ability and the spell burst. But I guess even though I like the card and I think it's good, I don't know exactly where I would put this. Obviously, there's, you know, cool synergy with something like Frost Nova, right? Spell burst triggers after a spell is played. So, you know, it's a 4 damage AoE, 4 mana AoE for 3 damage, which is pretty solid. It's a setup card, so it's not something that I would really want to just drop on turn 1 like in a Highlander Mage. And there isn't currently like a freeze mage going on, and I don't think you'd really put it in a tempo Cyclone Mage either. So I like the card, just don't know where its home would be. So I think it's likely that we won't see it all that often. Into the Paladin cards we go. First up, we've got the Imprisoned Celestial, which is a 3-mana 4/5 with Dormant for 2 turns, and Spellburst, give your minions Divine Shield. At first glance, I thought this was kind of cool, but I don't think it'll see a ton of play. I don't think the payoff is worth it. Like, 3 mana, do nothing for 2 turns. Like, if you're a mid-range, like, dude deck if you're trying to play minions to obviously benefit with the Divine Shields, like you're kind of a curve deck, most likely. You're playing for tempo. So, obviously it's got good stats and, Divine Shields could be kind of great. But again, like I don't really think having Divine Shields is necessarily like a win condition, So Libra Paladin is, the most popular paladin archetype right now, and you've got the goody 2 shields. I'd much rather be dropping a goody 2 shields or something tempo oriented on turn 3 as opposed to this. It is interesting that it has spell burst, so I think it's better that it has spell burst rather than it just like completely activating when it comes out of dormant, because it would allow you to sort of set up the turn with more minions if you didn't have any on the board. So it's okay. I don't think it's good enough, honestly. Next up is a dual class card between Warrior and Paladin called Barricade. It is a 4-mana spell. Summon a 2/4 guard with taunt. If it's your only minion, summon another. So basically summon 2/4 taunts for 4 mana. Honestly, I think it's all right. I mean, I think it definitely has a place in decks that don't want to run cheap defensive minions like a big warrior or a dual paladin. Those cards are playing, really high value cards to cheat out with either a commencement or a duel, that kind of thing. So, if this card were to be played, it would definitely be in those kinds of decks. I mean, Big Warrior is really not that bad of a deck. I actually quite enjoy playing it a bit. So, and if for whatever reason I'm actually undervaluing this card a little bit, and it makes Big Warrior much better. And same thing with Dual Paladin. They're fun decks to play. I would love if this card actually is nice. As a nice defense. But I will say that with Warrior, like, I think Warrior has a decent amount of defensive tools that go beyond just summoning a couple of taunts. Like, you can always just Blade Storm or Shield Slam or Brawl or Shield Block. There's definitely stuff to do. But you know what? I like it. I would put it in those decks, and it could really work out. I just don't know how much it would really change the like win rate of Dual Paladin and Big Warrior to being, a top tier meta deck. But I like it for those decks nonetheless. Next up, we've got a Paladin and Priest dual class card called Rally, which is a 4-mana spell that resurrects a friendly 1-cost, 2-cost, and 3-cost minion. I think anytime there's this... Anytime there's like a single card that can sort of put a decent amount of board presence on the board, it's always a card you want to keep an eye on, because I think it has the potential to be really good. So like sort of comparable to something like Call to Arms or, the Mass Resurrection Spellstone. Obviously that was way more expensive, so could have higher value minions. But even in this, for a 1-cost, 2-cost, 3-cost minion, I think there's a lot of potential here. The first cards that come to mind that would be really good to resurrect would be in Paladin, like McGurgle Prime. Getting multiple primes in the deck could be huge. Goody 2 Shields is a great minion. In Priest, I could see... a Frazzled Freshman, even the Prime, I don't know, like Reliquary of Souls could work. The 2-cost Sethic Veilweaver, that's a huge card for Priest right now. And, they already have more ways to get it back with Raise Dead. I feel like every time I kill a Veilweaver, another one comes right back because of Raise Dead. So this is just now another instance in which you could get it back. I've always had a lot of hope for the Nazmani Bloodweaver. I think there's some potential there for a Tempo Priest. Can a Tempo Priest be amazing without Divine Spirit? I'm not sure, but I think it potentially could. Or Injured Blade Master would be another great resurrect. So I actually think Rally is a card that we need to keep a lookout for, and I personally would love to see a Tempo Priest be really good in the meta. But so we'll see what happens, but I think this is a pretty good card and one to keep an eye on. Moving on to another Paladin card, that is a weapon, Librim of Judgement. It is a 7-mana 5/3 weapon with the Corrupt Gain Lifesteal. Wow, they're printing more Librims. That's really cool. I don't see any reason why this wouldn't be played. Obviously, to corrupt it, you need to play something more expensive than it, but if there's anything that we know from playing with and against Libra Paladin now, is that it's not that hard to get your Librims greatly reduced from all the different cards that reduce the cost of the Librims. So, this could easily be corrupted, when it's 1, 2, 3 mana in the deck. So it's 15 damage, smacking you down, in addition to all the pressure from the pen flingers and the Librims of Hope. And, the 15 lifesteal is actually really significant too, because again, I don't think it'll be that difficult to corrupt. So, like I said, I'm sure that we will be seeing Librim of Judgment if Librim Paladin stays strong. And I don't see Librim Paladin going anywhere. So this card seems actually really good to me. On to a new Priest Minion, Light Steed. It is a 4-mana, 3/6 elemental. Your healing effects also give affected minions +2 health. So essentially, cast a circle of healing and you get a power word shield, a board-wide power word shield, I guess. This type of card is obviously supposed to go into some kind of a board-centric tempo oriented deck, and I just don't think that this is good enough to make Tempo Priest good. Like, in talking about the card Rally that we just went over, Rally seems like it could be a powerful enough of effect to really further like a more tempo oriented type of priest, but Lightsteed just doesn't cut it for me. It's like, it's not the worst stats, it's pretty, it's decent in stats, but I just don't think the effect is good enough. And in discussing the concept of Tempo Priest, I must say losing Northshire Cleric is absolutely huge for the archetype. I do believe that Rally could potentially do enough for it, but imagine if you could just bring back a Northshire Cleric with Rally. So anyway, a lot of the times with the healing effects, you'd want to combo them out with a huge amount of draw with Northshire, but the fact that we don't have that anymore makes me think that Lightsteed just probably won't make the cut in a meta deck, but I'm sure we'll see some experimentation with it. The new Priest Legendary is called Dark Inquisitor Zanish. It is a 5-mana 3/5 with Battlecry. Reduce the cost of all corrupt cards in your hand and deck by 2. So when I first saw this card, I actually kind of got excited at the concept of like a control Yasharj Old God, control deck. But then I went and looked at the corrupt cards that Priest has access to, and they're really not that great. So I actually don't think this card will see play, mainly because at the selection of cards that would be corrupted just isn't all that good. There's Carnival Clown that is neutral. Maybe you could, make that the win condition of the Yasharj deck, but I just don't see it, unfortunately. I like the idea of it because, I love a good Yasharj deck, but Yasharj. But I just don't think Priest is going to cut it. On to some Shaman cards. First up, we've got Landslide. It is a 2-mana spell. Deal 1 damage to all enemy minions. If you're overloaded, deal 1 damage again. I think this card is at like one of the absolute best of the set, honestly. This thing seems pretty busted in my opinion. It should not be too difficult to overload yourself. So, basically it's a 2-mana Consecrate, and there's clearly a lot of options for spell damage for Shaman right now. So if you've got something like the Rune Dagger actually equipped is kind of nuts, because that's persistent spell damage. You don't even have to play a spell damage card on that turn if you've already got it equipped. That's potentially a 2-mana Flame Strike, which is insane. So I could see a lot of different Shaman decks utilizing this. And it's also in 2 swings, right? So you could potentially like pop a board of like small little death rattles or something like that, and then re-kill, a reborn minion or something like that. So Landslide, like, top card for sure. We're gonna see this a lot in Shaman. On to Mistrunner. Mistrunner is the 5-mana 4/4 with Battlecry. Give a friendly minion +3/+3. Overload +1. Overload 1. Wow, yeah, Mist Runner seems really insane as well. It is a battle cry, can totally go into Quest Shaman, plus giving a minion +3/+3 in stats on a 4/4 body, totally solid. It almost kind of reminds me of like a little mini Bone Mare. I think Bone Mare might have given taunt, but still, it's reminiscent. And again, you know, overloading for one really isn't too bad. And there's a bunch of synergy with having overloaded crystals that is currently in standard and is coming out as well, like we just discussed Landslide. So absolutely in anything that's tempo oriented, mid-range, anything that centers around having something on the board, I'm sure Mist Runner will probably be an auto include in all of them. We've got a couple of rogue cards to discuss here. We've got the Sparkjoy Cheat. It is a 3-mana 3/3 with the battle cry. If you're holding a secret, cast it and draw a card. I don't know why they printed this card for Secret Rogue, if I'm being completely honest. Like, look, I like Secret Rogue. I play Rogue. I play Miracle Rogue. So I'm kind of happy to see it because I do actually think that this card might single-handedly shift people more towards Secret Rogue than the World Kick Rogue. But even now, without this card, Secret Rogue is still pretty decent. One thing to note is that Shadow Jeweler Hanar would not be triggered by this card because it casts it from the hand. You aren't technically playing it, so I guess that's a little something. But it does cheat out the secret without having to pay the mana cost, and it does draw you a card. Obviously, Rogue has Secret Passage, so I don't really think it's really lacking on a ton of card draw. But yeah, I mean, look, it's a really good card for the archetype, and I'm sure we'll see it a lot. And I guess that kind of segues right into Shenanigans, which is a new secret. It's 2 mana. When your opponent draws their second card in a turn, transform it into a banana. I like this card. I love the name, Shenanigans. The bananas are funny. I don't really think you'll put this in rogue decks, honestly, unless there was a really crazy oppressive combo deck and you absolutely needed to counter it. Sure, maybe. But typically you want to be putting secrets in your deck that like actually further your win condition or your strategy, right? Like Dirty Tricks draws you a card, Ambush puts something on the board that like needs to be answered, Plagiarize is just good. So I don't think Shenanigans will be included in the main deck, but maybe you'll discover it off of a Hanar and be able to banana your opponent's Rattlegore in one of your games. It's possible. But it's a fun addition to the secret pool, I guess. But the Sparkjoy cheat is really, really good. And like I said, maybe it'll shift us into seeing Secret Rogue a little bit more than World Kick Rogue at this point. On to a Rogue and Warrior dual class card. It is a 1-mana spell Nitro Boost Poison. Give a minion +2 attack, and if it's corrupted, and your weapon. So my mind first goes to Rogue, as I think this is fantastic in Rogue. We already see aggro Rogue with the self-sharpening sword, or even a weapon Rogue with the Steel Dancer. That kind of deck is already seeing play in Standard. And for those of you who don't know, I should have said this earlier, I'm mostly a Standard player. I don't play as much Wild, so I can't necessarily talk about the implications there as much. But in terms of Standard, we already see this aggro Rogue at a pretty decent win rate. So I think this fits right in as it's not that hard to corrupt. Rogue is playing things like Eviscerate, or like I said, the Self-Sharpening Sword. That's like the whole win condition of the deck, smacking your opponent with that weapon. So I think this is great, honestly. And even with Stealth Rogue, you know, you're playing stealth minions, obviously, and so it will have a target for the minion buff as well. So in Rogue, absolutely, I'm sure this will see a ton of play. Now for Warrior, I do think there are also some synergies here. There is, you know, in Rage Warrior, that kind of centers around copying minions with the Mercenary. So the fact that you could like buff a Korkron with this, copy it, obviously it has to be damaged. So that's something to consider, but still just the concept of like adding attack to your minions, and as in addition to your weapon as well, because those aggressive or enraged style of warrior decks are of course playing weapons too. So I think this certainly could be justified in a tempo enraged deck as well. It gets a thumbs up from me. I'm sure we're going to see it a lot in aggressive style of decks. A new warrior weapon called Spiked Wheel. It's a 1 mana 0/2 weapon, has +3 attack while your hero has armor. Now I actually like this card because it allows for a good curve, right? You can equip on 1, armor up on 2, and play the new Ironclad on 3. You could draw it on 2 with Corsair Cache, and on 3 have enough to equip it and armor up, right? On turn 3, there's always upgrade to keep boosting this up. So I think the fact that it's cheap and 3 attack, I mean, hey, Fiery War Axe is not so bad, right? And it's not that hard for Warrior to gain armor. So I actually kind of like the Spiked Wheel. I think we will see it, and there's a decent amount of synergy going with the whole armor thing right now, like especially with the new 1-drop, the armor vendor, right? So there's different ways I think that you could activate this, and I don't think it would be too difficult for it to see some play. On to another warrior minion here. We've got a 3 mana 2/4 mech called Ironclad with the battle cry, if your hero has armor, gain +2/+2. So a 3 mana 4/6. Pretty good. I don't see anything wrong with this card. I think it's actually really good. Obviously, 3 mana 4/6 in stats with a try being a mech. I don't think anyone could say that this is bad. It just kind of goes along with this concept of just because I think this card is good, will it find a home in a particular meta deck? And the fact that it is a mech means that perhaps it could go into a N'Zoth style of deck, but granted, bringing back a 2/4 mech with N'Zoth isn't really all that crazy, but it's synergy nonetheless. It is sort of interesting that it needs armor to be activated for the battle cry, but it does feel like a tempo card because it's so aggressively statted if you get the buff. So it is kind of it is interesting, but maybe it'll find its home in a tempo deck. It's not too hard to armor up on 2 right into on curve 3 mana 4/6. So that concludes the class cards of the new mini set. So we're going to move on to the neutrals here. We've got the first one, Armor Vendor. It is a 1 mana 1/3 with battle cry. Give 4 armor to each hero. This is a card you love to see if you're a control player like me. Neutral, good statted minion, and so hopefully, kind of combat some of the aggro that's going on in the meta right now, because it does seem that aggro is certainly getting some more tools. But will we see a plate breaker meta? I wonder. Probably not. But it's interesting that we're discussing this one now because the last card we talked about was the Ironclad, which this could easily activate the Ironclad in Warrior. But yeah, we've seen these types of cards before, right? There was the Mistress of Mixtures, Plated Beetle. Anytime there's just sort of like an early drop for control decks to have something to sort of combat early boards from aggressive decks and give you health is really neat. So I could see this in even a Quest Shaman potentially. It's a battle cry and it's nice little defense. Mage traditionally struggles with a lot of reliable healing. You pretty much always have to run Ice Barrier and a Highlander or Control Mage. So I could see myself wanting to put this in a Control Mage deck. It's not the flashiest of minions, but it is something that I'm sure we are bound to see a lot in slower archetypes for the next couple years. Moonfang is the new neutral legendary. It is a 5 mana 6/3 beast. It can only take 1 damage at a time. So there's a couple of places in which I see Moonfang potentially ending up. One is maybe for an aggressive style of deck, the top end for that archetype. I would think that, unless there already is some board presence to like throw some minions in, it should be reasonably difficult to remove this because, oftentimes control decks have like an AoE card or, single target removal like damage. But I will say that, Destroy should be able to answer this right because that would get through the damage. So Shadow Word Death would not be an issue in answering the Moonfang here. So I think it's okay. And it could be, like I said, really useful for aggro. The other place in which I see Moonfang is also maybe in a N'Zoth deck. It is a beast, so that's cool. It's got a tribe. And again, like, I could see it being somewhat sticky. But I'm a little unsure because if you are playing against control decks, like I said, Destroy, like Twisting Nether, Death, that kind of stuff will get through it quite easily. But unless you have access to those unless you have access to those tools, it could be difficult to remove. So I'd keep a lookout for Moonfang. It might just not be good enough if there is enough removal from a control style of decks to get through them quite quickly, but I think there is some potential here. Next up is Runaway Blackwing. It's a 9-mana 9/9 dragon. At the end of your turn, deal 9 damage to a random enemy minion. Oh, I love it. I think it's fantastic. The reason why I love it is because I love to play Ramp Druid or a big Druid. I could see this being a perfect target for something like Strength in Numbers, or you know, something randomly popped out from Ysera Unleashed. Granted, Ysera is going to rotate in April, but still, I love the Blackwing. It's obviously very reminiscent of Ragnaros, but you know, it's targeted at minions. So I can see this being a house in Arena for sure. I don't really play a ton of Arena, but this seems pretty bonkers to control your Arena games for sure. So the first place I'm going to put this in is a Strength in Numbers, Ramp Druid, Big Druid, and we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I mean, look, I love dragons. I think this is a great addition to the neutral dragon pool. I can't wait to also, like, you know, sometimes you randomly pick up dragons from Dragon Queen Alliestrasza or Emerald Explorer, that kind of thing. So I'm sure we'll see Blackwing show up from time to time. On to another neutral minion, we've got the 2-mana Crab Rider. It's a 2-mana 1/4 Murloc with Rush and Wind Fury, and it's a Murloc. So the fact that this is neutral and it's got Rush and Wind Fury and really decently statted. Like this little guy is going to be a house. I can just tell. It obviously works great with any kind of buff effects. There's the new Shaman Mist Runner that would be perfect for this. There's a whole bunch of buffs in Paladin. I think the potential to see this guy, just because it's got such a high health pool, is really likely. And it's got a tribe, right? It's a Murloc. So I'm sure we're going to see the little Crab Rider again, and Twitch chat will spam Crab Rave once again. And lastly, we've got the Death Warden. It is a 3-mana 2/5 neutral. Death Rattles can't trigger. So a tech card that's been added to the pool. Right now, I don't think there are any ridiculously oppressive Death Rattle decks, so I don't know how often we'll really see the Death Warden. The first thing that comes to mind is like maybe it's got protection against a board clear of like Lord Barov, for example. But in general, I think, you know, it'll be meta dependent. If Death Rattle decks really become huge, I'm sure we'll see Death Warden included. It's got good stats, right? 3-mana 2/5 is solid. But again, not too much to say, just a nice option, I guess, for a future tech card if the meta gets really dicey with Death Rattles. Well, guys, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed my review of the new mini set, the Darkmoon races. I know I tried to go through these cards quite quickly, but they only gave us 2 days before the set was released, so I have to try and turn this around quite quickly here. So I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Anyone that is subscribed or has followed my content, if you liked it, give the video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. I'm definitely going to be playing a lot of the new cards when it releases tomorrow, and you're bound to see a lot of highlights on my channel of those games as well. All right, thanks everyone. Have a good day.